This is Elizabeth Creamer. I'm a retired faculty member from Virginia Tech, and I have been dabbling in social media and YouTube's and created this series called Full Disclosure. And this is the sixth video in that. And in this, I wanted to specifically address the question of how to respond when someone gets the advice they shouldn't have. They should avoid a mixed methods dissertation. I rarely do a workshop or presentation, webinar, when during the question and answer period someone says to me, I was told I shouldn't do a mixed methods dissertation. It's really like doing two dissertations. And my response when that happened about a week ago was to say, oh, are people still saying that? That just seems so ill-informed and out of date. So let me talk just a little bit about the arguments that are presented to people, perhaps the misperceptions that people have about mixed methods that may be behind that. One of the assumptions that people say, well, it's really doing two dissertations, I think is based on a rather outdated view of mixed methods. And that is that it necessarily always approaches the task with two different phases, with a qual phase and a quant phase, and that those are separate. And that because they're separate, minimal interaction between the two, then it's easy for someone to cut one off. Now, they rarely say that about studies that are done, for instance, to develop a survey instrument, which is a classic and one of the original reasons that people did mixed methods. In that setting, people don't really question the idea that first you develop an instrument, usually by collecting interview data or focus group data, you develop a survey, then you administer the survey, and you move on from the qualitative to the quantitative. Usually people don't object and say that's two phases. It is two phases. It's not two studies because the goal is to create and test a survey instrument. There are many more interactive designs where there is much more fluidity between the qualitative and quantitative strands. And that's what the sort of fireman carry in the right-hand side looks like. So a more integrated approach might, for instance, be to pair mixed methods with case study, to do a mixed methods case study. Or I have written recently about pairing mixed methods with grounded theory. Just recently released a book on that. It's using the logic of mixed methods with the grounded theory, and they are more integrally related in those kinds of studies. So usually the assumption is it's two studies, therefore you don't need to do two, just get simple, keep it simple, and just do one. I think a second major reason, also coming out of the 90s, is this argument that we always hear about mixed methods. So this is another issue that's usually brought up. It's another misperception about mixed methods. And that is the assumption that may be behind some of the advice that is given. The qualitative approaches and quantitative approaches come from two fundamentally different and therefore incompatible paradigms. And this can explain why some people do keep them separate. Don't let the qual and quant procedures and findings talk to each other. It sort of reflects this idea. My perspective on that is when one person is doing the research, they come in with one paradigm. I do not believe that people can switch between different paradigms because that's your views about knowledge, what makes good knowledge, what is truth, what is quality, what is good research. I approach both qualitative, quantitative, visual methods with the same paradigm. I used to think it was constructivism, but I don't think it's that's the best descriptor now. Many people refer to pragmatism as a paradigm where you can approach both qualitative and quantitative. Constructivism is certainly one. People use a transformative or emancipatory paradigm that they apply to both the qualitative and the quantitative. In mixed methods, people talk about dialectical pluralism, which is really the idea of this sort of creative tension that you go back and forth between qual data and qual analytical procedures and quant data and quant analytical procedures about similar constructs, and you move fluidly between them. They do more than inform each other. Another way I think this advice is really out of date and perhaps rooted in the early days of when mixed methods was first being formalized as a distinct methodology in the late 80s, the 90s, early 2000s. This is a map that Plano-Clark published, Vicki Plano-Clark published in 2010. It ends off in 208, but it shows this very steep climb over time between 1996 and 208 in the number of mixed methods dissertations that were published. This is 10 plus 15 years, almost not quite 15 years out of date now. This curve has continued. You could lay directly on top of this the trends in publications that are recognized as mixed methods. And that period in there, 2000, 2002, 2004, that's when that curve began going up. You could argue that before then, there was a lot of mixed methods research that used multiple methods, but they didn't start to be called mixed methods until later on. So the advice is really define trends where there is a very dramatic growth in the number of mixed methods dissertations. So you certainly wouldn't be out there alone. In my own work, I have found that some of the most innovative mixed methods research is being done by doctoral students in their dissertations. I didn't know this, but after I finished my first textbook, An Introduction to Fully Integrated Mixed Methods Research, that really emphasizes analysis, I picked one exemplar per chapter. I had 9 chapters, 9 exemplars. It wasn't until the final chapter, when I put it all in a table, that I realized the majority of those were publications or were articles that were published from a dissertation. That wasn't one of my selection criteria, but it turned out that the majority of my exemplars started as dissertation research. So the idea that a graduate student or a doctoral student could not have the expertise necessary to do mixed methods research is really defies the idea that many of our best exemplars are coming from graduate students. And I must say they often are working in consultation with people who have considerable expertise themselves in mixed methods. So what's a good reason to do a mixed methods dissertation? And it's really all here just as simple as this. Nowadays, I do not meet many doctoral students who go through the rigors of PhD research, who devote the time and the resources and everything else to a dissertation, to completing a dissertation, completing a degree, who do not want to publish from their dissertation. That was a different thing 20 years ago, but the path to an academic career begins with your choices at the dissertation stage, not even to mention before that. So pick an ambitious dissertation, get a lot of data, perhaps more than you need. This can fuel an academic career. This is part of your job talk. Your job talks when you apply for academic jobs. Many people nowadays will not consider someone who has not published from a dissertation. Most of us are pained when someone finishes a dissertation and after all that work, there's usually something interesting that comes out of it. And for it to sit on the shelf seems such a colossal waste of time. So let me give you just a couple of suggestions about how to handle this advice. What can you do to push back on it? We know it wouldn't be wise for you to say, well, that's a really out-of-date view of mixed methods. That's probably not going to get you anywhere. I've mentioned already what I've listed here is number 2. Hopefully somewhere on your campus, maybe not in your department, you can find somebody with expertise in mixed methods research who can sit on your committee, who can help you design a study and serve as an advocate for you, can speak for you, can bring their expertise to help other members of the committee who are less familiar with mixed methods. Secondly, it's all about self-education. Someone might say to you, well, you know, we don't have a mixed methods course. There's no way you can develop your expertise. That's really not the case nowadays. Many doctoral students will find themselves developing a specialized expertise that goes way beyond what they can learn in their methods courses. And that comes through self-drive, motivation. Nowadays, of course, so many resources are online that it is not difficult to find, to get exposed to the broad range of views about mixed methods. I list just one in these slides, the Mixed Methods International Research Association. I served as president of that, and I was on the board for a number of years. It is a phenomenal resource for graduate students and postdocs for a very nominal fee. You can get access to what I bet now is 40 or 50 webinars, recordings, some of the most famous people, well-known people in our field. You'll get a sense of their views about mixed methods. They also offer a series of course modules on a rotating basis. They refer to this as a MOOC, and that's all part of your membership. So this is a list of other resources, other YouTubes that I have done. I will put these slides up in ResearchGate so that you can access the links right from ResearchGate. So I guess to sum up to say, I think this is poor advice to tell someone not to do a mixed methods dissertation. I find it frustrating that people are still getting that advice. I'm sorry if you get that advice. But hopefully I've given you a couple ideas. You need to persevere. You need to develop your own expertise so that you begin to use the language and the terminology, and you can refer to references and say, now here's some examples, and you can develop your own credibility in terms of mixed methods. So I hope this has been helpful.